Welcome back. In this particular episode, we're going to look at something that I feel very strongly about because it is now becoming mainstream. The way that we deal with each other, if we decide to deal with each other, should be in good faith. And anytime an individual approaches a situation seeking a relationship, then it would just stand to reason that that would be the way that they approach things in good faith. But now I hate to warn you, the video that we're about to get into is an example of misandry in the main. And so let's get into the video and see what we can find out.
Tell me the most sexist thing someone has ever said to you on a date. Okay, I'll go first because I have.
I was on a date with this very beautiful spawn of Satan. And anyway, she decides to bring up her divorce in detail. And after about 30 minutes, I'm sitting there, eating my pasta, trying to get through it because this is not a fit at this point. And I asked, was he a good man? She said, yeah, he just worked all the time. So I asked, well, was he good to his kids? There was two of them. Was he good to his kids? She said, yeah. She says, but to get what I want, I had to say he molested one of them. Completely thrown back by that. I really didn't know what to say. And I said, did your attorney know this? She said, yeah, she's the one suggested that I say it.
Now, in that short clip, 1 minute and 2 seconds is how much time elapsed in between when it began and when it finally concluded. Can you see how the mistreatment of men is something that is commonplace? And so the gentleman who was being very forthright about what had happened, he went into a description of a date that he went on with a young lady who had 2 children. And so as the night went on, they began to talk about various subjects, but then they ran up on this subject of a divorce. And so he began to question her to see what kind of man it was that she was initially dealing with. And so she readily said that the man was a good provider. The only complaint she had is that he worked all of the time. And then he asked about whether or not he was good to the children. She says yes. But in order for her to get the things that she wanted out of him, she had to say that he molested the children. And upon being probed further, the man wanted to know whether or not her attorney was aware of what she was saying. And she said that her attorney was the one who prompted her to say these ridiculous things. Wow. So now let's go back and hit a couple of the high points, I should say. The first point, she complained about the fact that the man worked too much. Listen, I've said this before in several of my other videos. This is actually a war. Make no mistake about it. This is actually a war that we as providers are involved in. It's a war because things have become so difficult to provide for our families. It's a war to provide resources for each and every one of our family members. And so a lot of times it requires more time. It requires more effort. It requires more of our attention because we want to make sure that the place that we have set up for our families remains intact. So I see no problem with that. I see no problem with that. And I speak strongly about that because as a man who has to go out and face the world every day and procure those resources, I can understand why the man would be more intent on spending more time so that he could gain the resources that were necessary. Evidently, she wasn't aware of the household budget. Evidently, she wasn't aware of the bills that had to be paid. Or else I don't think she would have had the same attitude when it came to him working and making sure that those necessities were met. The second thing, he was a good father, evidently. Evidently, he was a good father. He set the proper example because not one time did you notice that in the conversation that the lady was having with the gentleman, did she make any reference to the man not being faithful, the man doing something that would jeopardize the marriage? No, he was a good father to his children. He set the right example, but he was making sure that he was becoming the best version of himself by continuing to work. That's nothing new from me. I'm an advocate of hard work. I'm an advocate of picking up a load and carrying it so that you'll learn the value of responsibility, accountability, discipline, and determination. This is nothing new from me. But now, the very fact that this lady had a difficulty, so much so that she began to lie on this man, to ruin his reputation because of what she wanted to get out of him. Now, what is that? Namely, child support, right? Probably alimony, probably any of the various means of draining this man financially because of the fact that there was something about the relationship that was superficial, that she just didn't like. Did he commit adultery? Was he spending the monies as if money was going out of style? Was he wasteful? Was he abusive toward her emotionally and physically and mentally? Was he any of those things? None of those things came up. The only thing came up was some minor annoyance that she had because of the fact that the man worked too much. And then probably in the future, she's going to get to hold to a man that doesn't work at all, period. And she's going to remember the way she treated this man. But now let's get to the final part. And I think it really speaks to the character of the lady in this particular instance. Because how is it that you allow somebody to convince you to come against your ex-husband, her husband at the time, with these egregious allegations? You know that the man was not abusing his children. You know that. Because if he was, you would have volunteered this information when you were talking to this guy that you were out on a date with. She would have volunteered that information if it was true. But since it wasn't true, then why allow somebody to lead you around by the nose in an effort to strip someone of the resources that they have worked so hard to procure? This is the reason why. This is the reason why young men and young women look at marriage as a losing proposition. Because there are individuals that are involved in this sacred union that only think about themselves. And when they do that, it leads to tragic consequences. So now what about this man's children? What about him? Has anyone thought about that? Has anyone thought about the children that are involved? You have introduced chaos into their life for a meal ticket. Alimony, child support, food stamps, things of that sort. You substituted all of those things for a father who was hardworking and who loved his children. It's her own admission. Go back and watch the video. She never mentioned anything other than the fact that the man worked too much. And in this day and age, you find yourself doing that more times than often, especially if you are the lone breadwinner. If you're the single breadwinner in the family, then your whole existence as a man is based upon provision and protection. So were her thoughts about what her husband should have been doing, were they unrealistic? Absolutely. I'll say that. I'll say it because it's true. They were unrealistic because the man had a responsibility to fulfill to his family, and he was doing his best to try to fulfill that responsibility. And this lady, like I mentioned, because of a minor annoyance, could not walk with that man in that journey. She couldn't be a helpmeet to him. She couldn't be someone that supported him and re-energized him so that he could go out into the world. See, that was her purpose in the marriage. That's something that she should have done as a wife. He was doing what he was supposed to do. He was providing and he was protecting, and he was teaching through his example. He was showing his son what kind of man he needed to be. He was showing his daughter what kind of man she needed to choose. So now you expose the children to all kinds of foolishness because of minor annoyance on your part. Where is the duty and the responsibility here? It's absent. And it's absent because people allow how they feel, their emotions, to cloud their judgment and to run out logic. When are we going to get the point? Family is important. Family structure is important. Keeping families together is important. Families don't need to be broken up by minor inconveniences on the part of others. That's just immature, if you ask me. And it's going to have a long-lasting, dreadful effect on the children involved. Misandry in the main. Hatred of men. You see it all throughout this particular interview. And one last thought. I'm looking square into the camera because I'm going to address this to the gentleman who was on the date with this woman. I was happy to see, sir, that you had resolved in your mind that this woman was not for you. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that you saw the red flags and you got out of the way. Because if she'll do her husband like that, the father of her children, what do you think she has in store for you? All right, those have been my thoughts. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Be easy.